to how B2B marketing has changed over a period of time. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, strictly from a financial standpoint, it's been an interesting journey, right? Back in, pre-COVID timeframe, right? Cash was relatively easily available to companies. There was plenty of money to spend and there were plenty of places to spend it also, right? There's no shortage of avenues from a marketing standpoint that you can go spend the money. Cash is no longer freely available, right? And so, budgets everywhere have been, tightened, right? And so I've said this to you guys before, right? My job is not to say no. My job is to say, if I give you this dollar, what do I get in return? And if the return makes sense, we would be foolish not to invest, right? Because, it will help drive growth for the company.
How has your decision making changed over this past few months as the teams have been using RevSure
Yeah,
more?
one of the biggest sort of use cases that sort of brought in RevSure for was to, answer the question of, what happens to lead from quarter X, whether it's 2 quarters back, 3 quarters back, 5 quarters back, right? Like we got X amount of leads, we spent all that money and got all those leads. How have they been progressing through the funnel?
Hi everyone, welcome to another round of RevTalks. I am Vishwajit Vyas, and today I'll be talking to Arjav, aka AJ Patel. AJ is the director of GTM Finance here at Snaplogic and one of our many valued customers here at RevSure. Welcome to RevTalks, AJ.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. Yeah, would just love to start off with just to give our audience an understanding of your background as a professional and how what was your journey like, and
Yeah.
what the current role is. Yeah.
Yeah, happy to. So, I've spent last, 15 plus years in sort of various finance roles across, multitude of companies, you know, from GM to Intel to Cisco, large companies, to, sub 100, person startups, right? And, 1,000 people, late stage startups, right? Various finance roles. Last probably 7, 8 years have been primarily focused on go-to-market finance, right? And so, have supported all sorts of, chief sales officers, CROs, COOs, CMOs, you name it, right? And sort of help them with, sort of not only sort of the OpEx management, but how to sort of operationalize the business and sort of some of the data and insights that, that they should be thinking about and looking at, to from their business standpoint.
Great. So, looking at the how you've been exposed to all these different facets of marketing and go to market as such, what is your point of view from the from the to how B2B marketing has changed over a period of time, specifically as you've seen the entire journey pre-COVID versus COVID and
Yeah.
post-COVID now, as well as zero interest rate phenomenon, and
Yeah.
we are post that. So how has this moved on? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so, I mean, strictly from a financial standpoint, it's been an interesting journey, right? Back in, pre-COVID timeframe, right? Cash was relatively easily available to companies. And so marketing budgets were fairly loose, right? There was plenty of money to spend and there were plenty of places to spend it also, right? There's no shortage of, avenues from a marketing standpoint that you can go spend the money. COVID kind of threw a curveball to everybody, right? I mean, I still remember being at my last company during COVID, right, where we had, registered for a bunch of trade shows and events, because that used to be our primary, lead gen demand gen engine.
Mhm.
And with COVID, none of those were happening. And, after like 3, 4 months, they started doing online. But, the lead flows were just not the same. The quality just wasn't the same, right? So you may be spending 30, 40% less, but your lead and, your lead volume is 70, 80% less. And the quality of those leads is, worse by, 2, 3, X, right? So marketers had to sort of really reevaluate, their thought process and, a events team that, a marketing team that was very focused on events now had to figure out other avenues to go and, create that demand gen because again, the goals didn't change a whole lot. They just had to figure out, how we were going to achieve those goals, right, from a demand gen, lead gen pipeline standpoint. So, I think the cash sort of constraint with also post COVID. And I think that changed, COVID sort of changed a lot of the behavior on the marketing team also, right? Where that over reliant on events and trade, big trade shows has now gone to, a lot of digital or other sort of creative ways of, content generation, like how do people consume content, right? And how do you create relevant content for your prospects and customers so that that it drives the sort of the lead gen demand gen that you want. I feel like marketing has shifted from a lot. I would say probably before it was 80/20, you know sort of art to science ratio. And now I'll probably say, I don't think it's 20/80 the other way, but I would say it's probably 60/40, 70/30, right? Where a lot of it is science driven now, right? Because you have analytics, right? Every dollar you spend on SEM, SEO, right? There's a ridiculous amount of analytics that you can get back as far as who saw the ad, who saw, what was the demographic, right? You have you have a ridiculous amount of data that you can sort of process to say what worked, what didn't work, how do we leverage what worked, how do we not do enough of what didn't work, right? So I feel like that art is turning more into science-based spend, right? Where it's sort of like, okay, I know if I spend this extra dollar, what do I expect to get in return? And if I don't get it, let's figure out why, right? Where did we go wrong, or what happened, right? You may not have done anything wrong, but what happened that this dollar didn't yield the return that we wanted to return, right? So, I feel like that, that has changed quite a bit, sort of post-COVID timeframe because marketers had to get efficient, right? The sort of the spread and spread your money everywhere a little bit and hope and hoping that you'll generate the right number of leads that will convert to right pipeline. It was no longer effective, right? Sort of especially during COVID times.
Right. And the movement or the continuum that you were talking about, right? The brand versus performance continuum
Yeah,
is shifting slightly towards the performance side as we see now. Now
yeah,
that marketers are being held that much more accountable from a ROI standpoint.
yeah,
Uh, so in that situation, the team needs to be that much more data driven in terms of
absolutely.
their approach.
Yeah.
Uh, so how do you see those, that changing in terms of, say, a budget approvals and, presenting insights to the senior leadership? How has that conversation and that dynamic changed over these past months and years?
So again, I think back, 4 or 5 years ago, a lot of it was like, hey, you want more, pipeline? I need more dollars, right? And again, it was totally up to sort of the CMO to sort of come and be like, okay, if you want 10 million in more pipeline, I need 2 million, 4 million, 6 million, whatever the number is, because again, a lot of it was sort of a black box on how they got to those leads and how they converted to pipeline, etc. I
Mm-hmm.
think, last probably 3 to 5 years, it's become much more of a partnership where they know we have access to a lot of, and not that, they were hiding those things before, but it was just, again, when it's, when a lot of it is art, it's hard to sort of quantify and justify, right? So, over the last probably 2, 3 years, right, as tools like RevSure have come on the market, right? It's no longer, finance teams, right? Sales teams, marketing teams, we all have access to a lot more data. And so they have to be data driven, right? To say, hey, you're asking me to generate more pipeline. Well, I don't really have budget to generate X. If you want me more, I am going to need, at 6x return, right? If for every dollar I spend, you get 6x in pipeline. At that ROI, here's sort of what I would need, right, from a budget standpoint, or 8x return, or 10x return, or 15x return, whatever that ratio is, right? Here's sort of what I need to generate that pipeline. So I feel like that conversation has become, or in opposite cases, right? If there's a budget cut that's needed, you
Mm-hmm.
sort of know to say, okay, if we don't think we're going to hit the bookings number by X dollars, right? You can adjust your pipeline expectations, which means I can reduce a marketing budget by Y dollars, right? Because you sort of have those ratios built out and you have access to them readily easily with 3, 4 clicks that you can get to, right? So I think that conversation is very heavily data driven to say why do you need that extra dollars, right? And again, that performance marketing has to deliver the goals that they have, and the goals were created based on certain thresholds, right? Certain some of these metrics and conversion rates and ratios. So if you're not achieving those pipeline goals, right, it's a matter of, okay, where is the leakage that's happening? And having the ability to sort of pinpoint on that and sort of figuring out what's the root cause of it, is extremely important for somebody sitting in my seat, right? To say, okay, we spent the money I gave you. Why didn't we generate the pipeline, right? Because that money was allocated and determined based on certain expectations and you hitting certain not volume, but also conversion rates, right? So quantity is important, but quality is just as important. And they're figuring out that right balance to say, hey, you're not just, stuffing at the top of the funnel to sort of, get to your, lead number that you may have as a sub goal, but that those leads are actually translating down into pipeline, actual workable pipeline that sales team can pick up and run with, right? And those pipe that's created is at the right time, right, where the prospect is looking for a solution, right, and having all of those insights that marketing is supposed to deliver, right, and figure out, to feed to the sales team, right, it becomes that much more relevant.
Right. And it's almost as if now you and the GTM finance team as such is looking at pipeline, both quality and quantity of it as
Hmm.
literally as a perishable asset, right? Because you are investing into it on a quarterly, monthly, yearly basis, and you
Yep.
are looking at this return like 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line. So
Yep.
it's a very asset allocation and asset realization, monetization kind of a conversation than just an ads ROI or a return on ad spends kind of a conversation. So it's a very it almost as if this relationship has leveled up in a certain way in this current way of things, right?
Absolutely right. And again, as I mentioned, right, cash is no longer freely available, right? And so, budgets everywhere have been, tightened, right? And so,
Right.
I've said this to you guys before, right? My job is not to say no. My job is to say, if I give you this dollar, what do I get in return? And if the return makes sense, we would be foolish not to invest, right? Because, it will help drive growth for the company. But that dollar, right? Every time I have that dollar, I have to think about, do I give it to sales to go hire an additional sales rep, or do I give it to marketing to go drive pipeline for the reps that we have, right? And that balance, right, becomes that much more because again, I don't have $100 to give out. I only have a dollar, right? And so figuring out, right, where we allocate that resource, right, becomes a very, critical strategy from a company standpoint also to continue to drive the growth that we need to, right? And again, we're not the only ones in this sort of situation, right? Every company is going through that to say, and look, even if you take one step up, right, it's not even sales and marketing, right? At the company level, the question becomes, okay, do I go hire another engineer? Do I go hire another dev person? Do I go hire another legal person, right, to help expedite the sales process? Do I go hire another accountant, right? So when you get it at the company level, right, what my boss, the CFO, is thinking about is, right, how do we allocate this to drive the biggest ROI for the company?
Right.
How do you, and from his seat, right? Thank God I don't have his seat, but from his seat is like, how do I determine the ROI of an accountant versus ROI of a marketing dollar, right? Well, one is very easily quantifiable, and people like me can help him get there to say, here's what the ROI of investing in marketing or sales would look like, because we have a lot of data that can sort of answer those questions now. Whether it's sales, whether it's marketing, you know investing in accounting or finance, right, becomes that much more difficult now, right? To say, okay, do we have bottlenecks? Do we have process pro challenges where things are not getting through, right, as fast as they need to be? And so now we need to, add that additional resource.
Great. And since you and a few of your colleagues have been using RevSure for a while now,
Yep.
what are the kind of questions you are answering using RevSure, and
Yeah.
how has your decision making changed over this past few months as the teams have been using RevSure more
Yeah.
frequently and finding
So
money?
one of the biggest sort of use cases that that we sort of brought in RevSure for was to answer the question of what happens to lead from quarter X, whether it's 2 quarters back, 3 quarters back, 5 quarters back, right? Like we got X amount of leads, we spent all that money and got all those leads. How have they been progressing through the funnel? What have we gotten for those leads, right? There's whether it's a particular event campaign that we ran or whether it's just broad overall, high level number of leads that, marketing generated and what happened to those. Things like, well, where were they at the end of the quarter when we reported out, right? At the beginning of the next quarter, QBRs happened and we said, okay, hey, marketing overachieved on the goal or underachieved on the goal, whatever that case may be, but here's sort of what we generated, and that should feed into pipeline, 1, 2 quarters down the road. So we all feel good and say, okay, yep, we're on track. And then we get to, 2 quarters later and we're like sitting there scratching our heads to say, where is our pipeline, right? Like, what happened to that, right? And it was very difficult to go back in Salesforce and sort of, again, where it is today in Salesforce, but it's very difficult to know where was it a month ago, where was it, 3 months ago, where was it, how did it evolve, how much of it sort of leaked out. It was very difficult to sort of have that stamping to say, okay, if I want to take a group of leads that we generated 3 quarters ago and watch them go all the way through the funnel, you're right, can I see that? It's like not really, because that connection, right? You may have multiple leads going, contacts or leads going into the same opportunity and multiple of them disappearing at the same time, right? So that transparency was very, it was very difficult for us to put that story together for exec team and leadership team to sort of make decisions on what's effective and what's not. We struggled and we would spend umpteen amount of hours and days trying to put that together. Sometimes we were successful because we would stitch bunch of things together and do Excel gymnastics to try to get there, right? But it was not cohesive and sort of you couldn't see that full view. With RevSure, right? I mean, even yesterday I was talking to somebody, right? Where they're like, hey, we're in the process of building out some dashboards internally. I was like, why? Why are we doing that? We have RevSure that can answer a lot of these questions for you. Give me an example of what you're trying to answer that you're not able to, find in RevSure, right? And some of the capabilities you guys have implemented, even over the past 3, 4 months, right? Things like being able to look at your cohort as of a certain date, right? Like, hey, you generated X number of leads. Now, in that quarter, now if I look at it on day one of the subsequent quarter, what happened to those leads versus looking at them today, right? And what the value, because marketing cares about what we generated when we generated it, right? And what the value was. They want that sort of time-stamped view. And with RevSure, now this is a matter of 2, 3 clicks, and we can get to that answer, right? The volume of leads and where they are sitting in the funnel, right? How many of them have progressed to the next stage, all the way to closed one? How many of them have leaked out, and at what stage did they leak out, right? And so now we can focus on, okay, is there a process problem, right? That we need to go address on, things when things transition from marketing to, sales organization, right? To the SDR organization. Do we have a process problem that we need to go address, or is there a quality of leads problem that we need to go address, right? So is there a sales problem that I need to go address, or is there a marketing problem that we need to go, address? So it's provided a lot of those insights to us to say, okay, where do we have a process problem versus a quality problem? And also, just like I said, the ease of use, right, within the tool, where within 3, 4 clicks you actually get to the answer versus sitting there for hours and days, staring at spreadsheets and trying to put that story together.
Great. It's great to know that you and the rest of the teams are using RevSure to essentially, basically, it's like a time warp of sorts, right? What probably would take you, days is being driven in just a couple of clicks.
Yeah,
So,
and I think marketing it's insightful to the marketing team also because they sort of know what has worked. And
mhm,
as they're now, just it's not easy like for me to just say, hey, marketing, because it worked this way, right? In that quarter, we're going to take that and make it forever, right? Because there might have been something unique that happened in that quarter, right? But now we have the insights to be able to see it at a campaign level to say, hey, is one campaign driving this anomaly? Right. And how do we sort of think about it from other campaigns, right? Doing similar things or not doing those things, right? Because it was really good or really bad. But
mhm,
but having those ability to sort of look at that, all the way at the global level, going down to the individual campaign level,
mhm,
with again few clicks, right? It's not like you have to sort of keep drilling down into it, right? But a few clicks, you actually get that summary view of how each campaign has evolved and performed over the past 3 4 months 6 months, right? Because again, we are primarily an enterprise SaaS company, right? Our sales cycles are fairly long, so you have to give it time, right? And some of those leads that you're putting into the funnel, top of the funnel, are going to take some time to go through the marketing side of the house, and then it's going to have a sales cycle, right? Once it gets into the sales funnel. So you have to think about it from that perspective, and almost, I mean, again, today we look at things sort of 2 quarters out from a marketing standpoint for pipeline goals, and then from a bookings goal I almost have to think about it as 3 to 4 quarters out, right? And so some of the decisions we're making today, we're not going to see the impact of that for 4 quarters, right? And sort of whether it worked or not. But when you have data, you can sort of it gives you that comfort level to say, okay, we're making a data driven decision versus just somebody's gut, right? And again, this goes back to the art and science conversation we had where again, it's not 80% science, right? Because then it just sort of takes the soul out of marketing, right? Is what my CMO would probably tell you. But there is a significant part of their job that is sort of data driven where, and then they add sort of the art on top of that, right? To drive the results.
great. Yeah, the art and science, along with the language that marketing so excels at, that's
Yes.
that's
It drives people like me nuts because it's like, no, it's like finance has no art or gray area, right? Like it's black or it's white for us, right? And it drives people like us absolutely crazy. But that's the world we live in. And again, if you want to be a good finance professional and be effective in your job, you have to speak that language, right? And you have to learn how to sort of influence those decisions with them and work with them, right, to sort of drive to the results that you need to do, right? I mean,
right.
it's that's something that, if you don't speak that language, like you're not gonna be effective in your job.
Right. Yeah. Because everyone is working at that intersection of art, science,
Yep.
and language, as to the way in which things are moving. The iterations, the level of changes that are happening both internally as well as externally is faster. The rate of change
Yes,
is faster. So,
for sure.
with a platform like RevSure that enables you to essentially shrink that time, how do you envision this relationship between go to market, finance, marketing, sales, all of these guys? How do you envision that relationship evolving over time? And how do you visualize the anticipate this change, and also how to actually work through this change together as a
Yeah,
team?
so I mean, look, it's probably evolved quite a bit in the last 5 7 10 years, right? Before, finance used to be a back office function, right? Like nobody wanted to talk to finance. Nobody finance didn't want to talk to anybody, right? We were happy sitting at our desk, with our heads in our spreadsheets and sort of, living our life and sort of just throwing things over the wall to our business partners to say, hey, I put this analysis for you, take a look. And then, if they had the time, they would look at it. If not, it goes into a black hole. I think over the last probably 5 7 years, that relationship has evolved quite a bit because I think finance professionals have started to realize that for you to be effective and for you to do that right analysis, you have to understand the business and not only understand the company business, but understand the business of your business partner and how they operate. And how do you cater to them, right? And what they need and what they look for in terms of making a decision. And when you build that partnership, true partnership where you are, an objective, inputter into their process, because again, you have no, sort of vested interest in which way the decision goes, right? You're just trying to help them up, sort of efficiently operationalize what their goals are and how to run their business. You don't care whether they spend it on X or Y. You have no vested interest. Your goals, your paycheck does not depend on that ultimately, right? Ultimately it does, right? But in sort of the direct way, right? Like, whether again, as a COO, gives the dollar to sales or marketing, it doesn't, it's irrelevant to you. If you have the budget, you're like, look, I've allocated it to you. It's your choice. My recommendation would be X. But at the end of the day, if decisions depended on finance, half the things in the world that exist today wouldn't exist, right? And that's why, right, we are there to help influence decisions. We're not there to make them, right? The business teams have to make the ultimate decision, right? And I think, in the last 5, 7 years, that partnership has improved drastically to where we are getting deeply involved into the day-to-day business, right, of the company as well as of the individuals we support. And if us in finance can't understand and figure that out quickly, we will become very irrelevant very easily, right? Because again, nobody wants to talk to finance if they don't have to, right? But if you want to build that strong, have that strong seat at the table, you have to go build that relationship where you say, hey, I will bring insights to you, and my feedback to you is going to be driven by data. It's going to be driven by analysis. I'm not just telling you, gut feel, right? And when I provide that insight to you, right, there's value in that, right? Again, what you do with it is up to you, but there's value in that insight, right? And I think, that evolution has already happened, and again, it has to continue to happen. And again, one of the big reasons why we brought RevSure in was to be able to effectively answer some of these questions that our leadership team was asking that we couldn't answer with just Salesforce or some of the bolt-on, apps we had as
Mhm.
easily, right? I mean, again, we could get there, but it would take us days versus, seconds, right? That it takes with the tool. And so, when you get to that stage, right, where you're not able to answer some of these questions or it takes you a long time to put those analysis together, you got to think about, right, hey, are there tools out there that can make my life easy? And if so, then it's worth investing in those because tools are easily scalable, right? Versus just throwing people at the problem. People are not. So, from again a true finance perspective, right? Like, if I have a choice between buying a tool versus buying a, has sort of supporting a headcount, I would go for a tool any day, right? Because again, if implemented properly, you can get, significant leverage out of that versus, a headcount.
Yep, yep. No, this has been a great insight into how the finance team can help marketing with the right kind of inputs so that the
Yeah.
marketing outputs can then deliver overall the company outcomes that are being shot for as far as a quarter or a month or a year is
Yep.
concerned, right? So, and it's also heartening to know that we are able to support you and Snaplogic in this journey through our platform,
Absolutely.
and would love to improve our product offering also in line with the needs that you have. I know you're never shy of asking, and we're never
I'm
shy.
not shy in terms of providing that feedback. You know that just as well as I do. So
Definitely, definitely, and that's the least I could accept from or expect from a fellow Gujarati and Ahmedabadi from you.
exactly. Again, like I said, I gotta get the most leverage out of the tool, right? So if the tool's not answering the questions that I need, it's time to let you guys know, right? Like, and look, some other things I'm sure, right? Like the questions that we've asked, right? It's been painful for you guys also, where you guys are sitting there, be like, I don't want to keep doing this, right? Let's figure out a way to build it into the tool so that he can go fish on his own, right? Like, because I'm sure it's not easy for you guys to put some of that summaries together also, right? But it's like, look, this is how we are operating the business. And if I'm thinking about this question, I'm sure, some portion of your customers are also thinking about it and don't have that ability to answer those questions. So it's like, okay, let's, let me just ping you to see if other people have asked you that question and you guys have figured out a way to answer those. And every time you guys, again, every time that I've asked that question of you guys, right, you guys have come back with the right answer, to say, look, we don't have it, but here's the data, right? We pulled it from the back end and here's sort of what you need to get going, right? And do what you need to do to present it out. In the meantime, we'll work on putting this in the tool, right? And creating the functionality within the tool. So, again, I can, thank you to you and the engineering team and the product team.